we were just talking before, he didn't actually realise that AKD was getting knocked down. That's where Alan stayed while I was here, so he's a little bit sad about that tonight, unfortunately. Alan studied, gained a first-class honours degree in English Literature and Education from the university here. He's also a cultural ambassador for National Collective, which, in case you don't know, is the open and non-party group of artists and creatives who support Scottish independence. Next to Alan on the panel, we have Mirium Brett, who is a fourth-year student, international politics student, from Shetland. She plays an active part in the Yes campaign, both here in Stirling and also nationally. Miriam has contributed also to National Collective, and she is a researcher for the Reed Foundation. Next to Miriam, we have Douglas Rooney, who, like Alan, is a former Stirling Uni student. He's a Labour Party activist and editor at the National Gazette. Douglas is in a unique position of formerly being involved with the SNP and the independence movement on campus, but now finds his views sit more neatly within BetterTogether, so a unique perspective for the evening. Next to Douglas, we have Alan Grant, who is a final year PPE student here in Stirling. Alan is head of news at Air 3 Radio, which is the campus radio station. Alan's also the head of the BetterTogether campaign on campus and is an activist, journalist and blogger. And lastly but no means least, we have Danny Gibson, who is a Labour councillor for Stirling East. He sits on the Audit Committee, Education Committee, and is convener of the Environment and Housing Committee. A member of United with Labour and BetterTogether, Danny campaigns locally and nationally for the United Kingdom. So can we have a round of applause for all of our participants? So as I said before, the Yes side, who are the three to my side, are starting first, and then we'll switch across. So I'm going to invite Angela to open the debate this evening. Absolutely. We'll maybe not get there like that, however.
We just wanted to briefly introduce the Referendum Week that's been brought about by the university. This is the first of many events. So I'm representing Yes Scotland here tonight, and we have stalls in the atrium all week from Socialist Party, we've got the Green Party, we've got Labour for Independence, Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, Yes Scotland in general, and an SNP stall as well. So come along and have a talk if you want any information or if you have any questions about these different parties and groups within the Yes campaign. Tonight, after the debate, straight after the debate, at 9 o'clock, we're heading to Envy, where we've got a National Collective night. National Collective is a group of artists and creatives for independence, and we've got music and readings there in Envy all evening. So entry's free and the bar's open.
Good evening. My name's Alan, I'm from the BetterTogether campaign. We're having stalls in the atrium as part of Referendum Week. Today we're having on Thursday as well, so please pop down if any questions, any criticisms, complaints, or anything you want to know about the positive case for the UK. Our big event of the week takes place tomorrow night in this very lecture theatre at 7 o'clock. We are hosting Anne Maguire, MP for Stirling, as well as Liz Smith, MSP from the Scotland Fife. They're going to be answering questions on the positive case for the Union and the possibility of further integration and the success of the integration settlement. We also have on Thursday night, we have a section of studio, that's our studio for those that aren't students here. At the far end, we just invite you down, have a refreshment with us, relax with us after a very tiring week, and just get to know some really informal, chill out kind of setting. I think before we begin as well, there was something we wanted to say as well. All of us in Scottish politics and Scottish public life were deeply saddened by the loss of Mara MacDonald. She was a remarkable woman to be admired and emulated, and Scottish public will be sadder without her. So can we just ask for a quick kind of...
Right, so actually I'll caught up on what's still to come in Referendum Week, but right here, right now, Angela.
Thank you very much.
That's not on.
That's it, it's on. Good. I'm not going to sing, so relax. I'll do many things for politics, but singing is not one of them. I'll leave that to Alan. Good. Can I say how great it is to be back at Stirling University, because I'm also a former Stirling Uni student. I did my social work training here in the Cottrell building. It was a few years ago. I did my Masters in Social Work here between 96 and 98. So that's 15 years plus. But it is great to be back here, and this is actually the first time I've been invited to speak at a political event in my capacity as an MSP. And so it's interesting to come back to Stirling as a politician as opposed to a social worker. What I will try and do in the 5 minutes that I've got, one, I'll try and stick to time. That's not easy because I can talk for Scotland. But I'm going to try and talk about what independence means to me, both as an employment minister, but also, I suppose, as a woman and a mother, somebody who has a real focus, I hope, on the well-being and the future prospects of young people. What I will try very, very hard not to do, I will try not to be partisan. I'm not going to promise, because I am a politician, but I think there's an important point to be made here, is that Scotland's national debate, this peaceful, democratic debate that's a credit to Scotland, actually transcends party politics. And certainly for the Yes movement, we have people of all political persuasion and none. But this debate is not about party politics or the SNP, it's about the future of Scotland, and it's a really exciting debate, and it's a historic debate, and for the first time on September the 18th, the people of Scotland will have sovereignty in their hands, and they will make that decision about what powers are returned to Scotland. I hope it's a decision about powers that are returned to Scotland, and that we're not making a decision about leaving powers, or, as I would say, abandoning powers at Westminster. Now, each of you will have, like me, one vote, one voice, and as citizens, you'll come to your own views about how you're going to vote on September the 18th. I suppose my appeal to you is, however you vote, and even if you vote no, please don't do it because somebody's told you that we can't be independent, or that we're too wee, or that we can't afford to be independent. Because Scotland is a rich nation. Unfortunately, we're not as rich a society as we should be. Now, according to the OECD, an independent Scotland would be the 14th most richest country in the world, whereas the UK would be at 18th. And I think the big challenge ahead of us is about how we use our resources, whether it's our natural resources in terms of wind, wave, oil, energy power, or whether it's our natural resources and our talented people, and in particular our talented young Scots. And don't let anybody tell you that Scotland currently doesn't pay our way, because for each of the last 33 years, Scots have paid more tax per head on average than in comparison to citizens in the rest of the UK. So for the past 5 years, we've got 8.4% of the population. We get 9.1% of the spending, but we contribute 9.3% of all UK revenues. We more than pay our way. And we actually have a very diverse economy. We've got life sciences, where we're leading the way in life-saving medications and treatments. We've got the creative industries, which are doing so much for Scotland at home and abroad. Food and drink in Scotland is absolutely massive. And despite public perceptions, engineering and manufacturing is still very important to the economy. It's a big year for Scotland. Tourism, hospitality, very important growth sectors. And of course, we've got our university sectors, big international part of our economy. And then of course we've got energy, a quarter of the European Union's renewable energy potential, and of course we've got oil, that dreadful, dreadful curse, if you listened to some people. Now, we don't depend upon oil. For me, oil is a bonus. And it's a bonus, it's a natural resource that we have to take seriously and use responsibly, because I would argue over the past 30 years we've squandered oil money and we've not used that natural resource to our best advantage. The UK is the only oil producing country that doesn't actually have an oil fund. So when the oil runs out in Norway, Norwegians will always benefit from that natural resource that we have, because they've squirreled away some of the resources for the longer term. Now, in terms of my personal reasons for being a supporter of independence, actually it was unemployment that brought me into politics. I grew up in a West Lothian mining village in the 1980s, and male unemployment at that time was at 1 in 4. And that isn't just a statistic to me, because my father was one of those West Lothian men that was unemployed in the early 80s under Margaret Thatcher. And I often joke that it's Margaret Thatcher that made me a Scottish nationalist. So for me, being an employment minister is actually very poignant, because tackling unemployment in all its forms isn't just a political commitment to me, it's actually a very personal commitment, because I know what unemployment does to families, I know what it does to communities, and I know what it can do to a country. And I know, as the Youth Employment Minister, and subject to parliamentary approval, next week I'll be the Cabinet Secretary for training youth employment and women's employment. I know the Scottish Government is doing well with the powers it has. I know that we have an education and a training skills system that is the envy of many. We've got record numbers of apprenticeships, we've got opportunities for all commitment, a guarantee to every 16 to 19-year-old in this country. But I also know that despite our additional resources and additional effort to help tens of thousands of more young people, actually we need to help tens of thousands of more. And what I need, instead of tackling youth unemployment and female employment issues with one arm tied behind my back, I need the full tools at my disposal. I need welfare powers, I need tax powers, and I need control over our economy. So I suspect my time is probably up. I'm getting the nod in the wink. So I'm looking forward to the question and answer session that we're about to have. Thank you.
I love her. I do.
So next up, ladies and gentlemen, we have Douglas Rooney.
Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, King James VI of Scotland became King of England in 1603. Somewhere in his journey between Edinburgh and London, he wrote a speech. This was to be delivered to his first English Parliament, and it would lay the seed of the political union between his two kingdoms. In it he said this: "Has not God first united these two kingdoms, both in language, religion, and similitude of manners? Yes, has he not made us all one island, encompassed by one sea, and of itself by nature indivisible, as those that were borderers themselves of those late borders cannot distinguish, nor know, nor discern their limits? These two countries are separated neither by sea, nor great river, mountain, nor other strength of nature. What God has conjoined them, let no man separate." 400 years ago, King James made the case for social unity. Today, after centuries of political and economic union, do his words have less resonance? Are we to believe that this family of nations has drifted apart, that we are separate, with ambitions and goals which run contrary from each other? Far from it. Together we have done and will continue to do great things. Together we policed the seas, helping to end the international slave trade. Together we faced the evils of Nazism and the brutality of communism. Together we created a welfare state which became the envy of the world, and together we have done much more besides. Have we as a nation done wrong? Of course, but show me the nation which has not sinned. The idea floated around by some nationalists that independence would allow us to wash our hands, but it is foolish, prompted by an infantile nativism which paints Scotland as the eternal victim. Make no mistake, this union, this family of ours, is ours. The political impetus for union was given by Scots, and while we must share in the guilt, we must also be proud of our shared achievements. So important, in fact, are these social bonds and shared achievements that even the SNP, a group which has dedicated the best part of 8 decades to tearing us apart, has, in this latest push, decided that we must keep our social union. The Deputy First Minister, no less, in a speech in Wales, went as far as to say that creating a border between us would bring us closer together. Well, in my humble opinion, that's much like saying if I erect a wall, it'll make it easier for me to see you. Now, don't get me wrong, don't doubt me. While our shared history will no doubt at the point of independence mean that we will keep some of the same customs and manners, in much the same way as Canada or Australia does, cooperation will be at the whim of the governments in Westminster and Holyrood, not built into the very fabric of our relationship, as is currently the case. The nationalist would have us break with our family, to make competitors where once there were friends. But for what purpose? What do we, the people, gain? Precious little. Already we have a devolved parliament for those issues which are peculiar to Scotland. And this is an institution which, contrary to national scaremongering, will be strengthened no matter who wins the 2015 general election. What will change with separation is that politicians in Holyrood will have bigger chairs to sit in and will have grander titles to give themselves. To quote George Orwell, nationalism is power hunger, tempered by self-deception. A yes vote is a vote for the furthering of the narrow interests and ambitions of a political class. But whether Bute House is the residence of a First Minister or a Prime Minister is of no interest to me, and it is certainly not in the interest of the people of Scotland. So, my friends, I call upon you to vote no in September. Vote no, and let us harness the energies we have used in this referendum. Let us reform that which does not work, renew that which does, and give rebirth to this union, this country of ours. Let the cry of radical unionism be reform, renewal, rebirth. And let us put to bed forever this nationalistic relic of the 20th century. We are one family, and together there is little we cannot achieve.
Don't clap.
I would also like to apologise for the historical example here, as I am a historian, and I kind of do that every now and again. Just habit, really.
Now, it's probably quite apt that at this moment I remind you that if you do have anything to say about what any of the panelists have said tonight, do remember we have our hashtag Stern Debate as well. So, next up, we have
I'm not on Twitter.
Hi, it's great to be back. I spent a lot of time in this particular room in the 90s because this is where we used to rehearse our musicals. So I've no idea if Stirling University Musical Society is still going. It certainly was at the time. And as it happens, myself and a guy called Robert Shorthouse used to work in these shows together. We were both in Greece. We were both in the Jets in West Side Story, and we were both, well, he directed Little Shop of Horrors and I produced it. And now he is the communications and press manager for BetterTogether. So it's a strange irony, you know, we're desperately fall out with each other. And we did all rehearsals in this room. So I keep waiting for all of you to burst into Grease lightning. It's kind of, yeah. Now, my reasons for voting yes are manifold, but they're fairly simple. One, I think it will be the most exciting thing we'll live through in our lives. I think everybody who wakes up the day after the referendum, if it's a yes vote, will feel an incredible sense of optimism and excitement and renewal about what can be achieved. Because even the people who currently are fighting against independence, many of them are very good people. I believe them when they say they care about poverty and equality, especially in the Lib Dems and Labour. And I'm pretty sure even those people will see the potential in independence after a successful yes vote, and will give the energy that they're currently using to making Scotland a better place. The sense of forward momentum will be incredible. If even 51% of people in this country vote yes, That's 51% of people who are awake. Consciousness is going on all over the country. I'm doing these talks up and down Scotland, in village halls, in community centres, in churches, in schools, every night of the week, to audiences this size. Now, Scotland hasn't seen a political energy like that since forever. It's a grassroots change. The SNP are there, obviously, they are very visible. They are currently leading the independence campaign, there's no point in denying that. But what's happening at the grassroots level is dwarfing them. People who have never been part of the SNP, people who have never been politically engaged, people who could care less about politics, which used to include me, to be quite honest, are now thirsty for ideas and for ways that we can change this country. So think about what that will feel like. And then think about what it will feel like if we vote no. There'll be some celebration from the Unionists, sure, because they'll have won. Everybody else will shrug and say, right, okay, what's next? And what is next? We don't know. The reform of the UK that was spoken about earlier, where is it? How are we going to change the UK? Change the Labour Party? Where's the evidence that can happen? The Lib Dems are currently in bed with the Tories. The rightward shift in British politics over the last 30 years has been incredible. And that politic can't change through its own momentum. It needs a shock to the system. And that shock to the system will be Scottish independence. Because when people in the rest of the UK see that we are transforming this country, see that we're protecting our NHS, protecting our welfare state, reversing the austerity cuts, redistributing the wealth, removing nuclear submarines, building council houses, they'll say, wait a minute, we were told Scotland was going to fall to pieces without us. We were told we were propping up that whole time. How can we not do this? Westminster. And that's when you'll start to see people across the UK wake up. Because there'll be an example right on their doorstep of a proper, functioning, healthy, modern democracy and an economy that works for the people. Because make no mistake, the feeling in the Yes campaign at large is for that change. It is a left-wing movement. It is a people's movement. And those people will not allow that to be betrayed by the SNP. If the SNP start to drift towards the right, bang, they're down. And we will elect a government which might be a Labour government, which might be a Lib Dem government, which might be a socialist or a green government. It will be up to us. But we will keep that leftwards course. And the rest of the UK will want it. This is a revolution that's happening here. And a revolution that we can pour south. Thank you.
Next up we have Alan.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to this really important debate. It's one that we have to be having. Thank you so much for turning in such great numbers. We are more secure, more prosperous, and better situated to take on the challenges of an interconnected, globalised, digitised, and ever-changing 21st century world with the backing of our friends and our family in the United Kingdom. Now, complacency is a very easy vice to fall victim to. We do it all we all do it from time to time. But it's well worth remembering that as part of the United Kingdom, our enterprising, maritime, and entrepreneurial endeavours flourish within an economy of 60 million people with preferential access to an economy of 500 million people within the European Union. The UK has been a banking, customs, and monetary and fiscal policy union for so long and has worked so well that we no longer even think of it in those terms. I'd like to ask, a caterer in, say, Inverness, for instance, thinks nothing of buying crockery from Liverpool, selling contracts in Cardiff, or hiring staff from Belfast. Why is this? Why is this remarkable feat of economic liberty coming into effect? Because we are part of the most stable, the strongest, and most well-organised economic and political union the world has ever seen. However, economic strength and security through economic and political union is not a buffet. I mean that very clear, it's not a buffet. Picking and choosing does not work. We either work as one country, trading seamlessly, cushioning shocks and enjoying the rewards together, or we go alone without those advantages. And now underpinning this particular case, and there are many, for staying within the UK, is the monetary union of the UK pound. A union so popular that even a lot of my separatist opponents want to keep it. Keeping the pound is in Scotland's interests. A union so popular, no country should ever want to get rid of such a stable and reliable currency. We have heard that staying part of a currency union in the absence of political and full economic union is the preferred plan of some of those in the Yes campaign. But it is most certainly not an option, never mind a preferred one, for the rest of the UK, should we break up. Now, what do we hear when this objection gets raised? Oh, we get, oh, they're bluffing. Don't worry about it. Well, I'll tell you this. As a poker player myself, I would love to sit at the table with Danny Alexander, George Osborne, Ed Balls, because they don't have a poker face between them. They're hopeless at it. These people don't bluff. When they say they don't have it. They just don't have it. You know, when they say something's going to happen or won't happen, that's what they mean. What are the possible other options? Sterlingization? Do we use the currency of another country without their permission? The Panama Plan, whatever you want to call it? That would mean the absence of a central bank, which is very, very important in terms of international relations. But bear in mind what John Maynard Keynes once said. He who controls the currency controls the country. As part of the UK, with access to the UK pound, we control our monetary policy. A new currency, maybe? And never mind the cost of setting up a separate central bank. Such a currency would suffer dramatic devaluation and cause misery for across Scotland. I've even heard the possibility of Scotland joining the euro. Now, would this be the same euro that requires ever closer political and economic union to be part of it? So leaving one union to go into a deeper one? Mind boggles, again. The pound is the best way forward for Scotland, and the only way to retain it, as well as continuing to punch well above our weight in a huge national and international marketplace, is to vote to stay in the UK and continue to work together. The economic case is very clear. Staying together and working together with our UK family is the best way forward for Scotland. That's why I implore you, in September, vote for stability, vote for security, vote to keep our currency, our economic clout, and our eyes turned outwards towards the rest of the world. Let us build upon the good that's been done, work to reform what needs to be reformed, and remember that through good times and bad, it is our unity, our strength, and our camaraderie that has made Britain great. We have more in common in business, in work, in our spending habits, and in our life and our outlook than we have differences. These things that we have shared allow us to become a place where many people wish to come and do business, to live, to work, to raise their families, which in turn become our families. All of this is made possible by our ability to prove that you accomplish more when you work together than you do when you don't. Thank you.
What's next up? Do we have Miriam Brennan?
So you just tweet it, but they don't actually see it, no?
Well, you can follow other people.
My name is Miriam Brett. I'm a fourth-year international politics student here at the University of Stirling. I just wanted to say a few things about the Yes campaign and what it is, what it means, and what it really stands for. Because I think there's a lot of miscommunication that's been going on here. So I'm not a nationalist. In fact, I'm not actually a member of any political party. This movement is about more than party politics. It's so much bigger than that. It's about a demand, a basic demand for social justice, for functioning democracy, and for compassion and dignity in the international community. For me, independence and Yes Scotland is about three main things. Firstly, functioning democracy. Now, yes, we live in a democratic country. We all vote in the Westminster election, or some of us do. And the party with the most vote wins. But since World War II, half of the governments that we have been ruled by were not governments that Scotland voted for. So what does this mean for us? Well, it means that we are constantly ruled by a government that does not reflect our political culture, which is by and large more social democratic. And with mere 9% of the UK population, we have very little leverage to change this ever. Now, I'm not going to say that there are no Tories in Scotland. There are Tories in Scotland. They got 200,000 roughly votes in the last general election. 200,000 votes. But 2 million people didn't vote for them. With independence comes decentralised power. The ability to elect a government that you actually voted for, and the ability to chuck them out if they're not doing okay. Functioning, real functioning democracy in our country. Secondly, our welfare state. As Douglas mentioned, and is mentioned time and time again by BetterTogether, when they speak about our history, they speak about the creation, the proud creation of our welfare state, and it is something to be proud of. Ironic. Look at it now. And look at our options. All three parties in Westminster want a continuation of this austerity. A continued austerity. Now think about austerity, and think about the rhetoric of it, and think about the reality and what it actually means on the ground to everyday situations, lives and people. It's a short-term means, right, to balance the budget, right? But it's not a short-term. We see it's long-term. Austerity is at the heart of Thatcherite economics. You roll back the state and invest in the market, in my eyes, over people. It's not a short-term means to balance the budget. It's nothing short of a systematic attack of the most vulnerable members of our society. It's an ideological move, in my eyes, in the wrong direction. Another reason to see a dissonance between rhetoric and reality when it comes to austerity is the promise to invest £100 billion in the renewal of Trident from Labour, Lib Dems and Conservatives alike. In today's interconnected, multipolar geopolitical landscape, Trident is a redundant relic. So irrational is its investment that I can only presume this is little more than a ditch attempt by a dwindling power to reassert its militant might. I don't recall a time when the UK played a constructive, positive role in the international community. I was 11 when New Labour invaded Iraq. In our name, Westminster has instigated immoral, illegal warfare. Now, the media have done a grand job, right? I'll give them that, of portraying this, of Yes Scotland and the independence movement as raving nationalists, flag-waving, spurred on by one man's dream to spread Wallace fever across the nation. But at the heart of this movement lies internationalism, and I say that as a part of Yes Scotland. I, for one, would rather be part of a smaller nation, with a smaller voice in the international community, granted, but one that advocates compassion and dignity. Independence is not a magic word. It is not the be-all and end-all. It's the first step in the right direction to a fairer society that safeguards its vulnerable and where commendable foreign policy fills the immoral vacuum. Thank you.
Gibson.
Okay, thank you very much everyone. Delighted to be here tonight. I'll introduce myself first of all. I was actually born and brought up in the People's Republic of Ayrshire, in a wee village called Mauchline, which many people in the room might know. It's famous for a lot of things, one of them being the home of our national poet, Ramsay Burns, and 5 miles from where I was born and brought up, you'll find the grave of one of my heroes, James Keir Hardie, who founded the Scottish Labour Party. He was a Scot. He represented the constituency in Wales. He worked to build a better United Kingdom, and I'm very proud that that's the political heritage that I come from. Like Angela, in fact, my granny tells me that before I could speak, I used to point at pictures of Maggie Thatcher in the paper in Boo, which probably says a lot of where I've come from and come today. But where I would differ from Angela is I note the fact that we've just this week had the 35th anniversary of those 6 SNP MPs at Westminster in 1979 walking into the lobbies with Margaret Thatcher to bring down the Labour government at that time and usher in the 18 years of Thatcherism that paid clay to Scotland. And I see it with no hint of irony when I see the proclaimers on their newspaper. It really gives me a good laugh to think that they're now the biggest cheerleaders for those people that walked in the lobbies with Margaret Thatcher to make sure it was Bathgate no more and Linwood no more. The irony is certainly not lost on me, I can assure you. However, like most of you, I came to Stirling to attend university and studied politics here, and I've lived it here since. I was active in the student union at that time, and I commend those that do that type of work. As a council member here, I remember proposing a smoke-free choice in our union before it became the smoking ban. And we're told by the management, it'll never work, it'll ruin the union. And then a year later, bang, the law changed because the Scottish Parliament changed the law of our country. And we should have been prepared for that as a student union at that time. We also passed our equal wages for all ages policy at that time because we wanted to equalise the minimum wage that was paid to the workers in our student union. Again, the management told us it wouldn't work, it couldn't be done. But I was delighted in May 2012 to be elected by people in my community in Stirling East Ward to represent them on Stirling Council. I was elected at age 30, so I'm the youngest Labour councillor there. So I've really learned in those 2 years, what's the purpose of local government? Well, we elect our councillors to represent us, to take decisions on our behalf, that shape the society that we live in. And I think it's actually crucial to get that kind of constitutional point, because this ultimately is a constitutional debate. Another hero of mine that's passed away this year was the great Tony Benn, who asked us all 5 questions. Tony Benn's 5 questions. What power have you got? Where did you get it from? In whose interest do you exercise it? To whom are you accountable? And the most important, how can we get rid of you? And those words certainly stay with me in the work that I do. And he said that only democracy gives us that right. And he was right. Now, we've been told with the Yes campaign, there's all sorts of stuff. It's about this, it's about that, it's about the next thing. But at the end of the day, it's about which politicians take what decisions in which building on our behalf. That's what we're deciding for us as citizens. And I'm conscious that many people in this room will not even remember life before there actually was a Scottish Parliament. I certainly do remember that time, and I remember with pride the creation of our Scottish Parliament. And I'm determined to fight to ensure that that continues, to make sure that Scotland has the best of both worlds. So, as a socialist, it's no part of me that we should separate. It goes against every single value and principle that I hold dear, because we've got so much in common right across the UK. Doesn't matter whether you're in Liverpool, it doesn't matter whether you're in Belfast, Cardiff, Inverness. None of this matters. Probably the best badge that I've seen so far, and I must try and find out who got it, I'll probably get it on Google. The little badge said, "I'm from further north than you." And that kind of sums up the kind of cynicism and nationalism to me. We're from further north than some other people on this island, on this land, and this earth. And my politics means that I'm simply not prepared to say, to heck with the people in Newcastle, to heck with the people in Liverpool, we're just going to go on our own and do whatever we want, and we're just going to leave you to it. I'm sorry, that's not what our politics should be about. That's not what our values should be about, because nationalism limits our ambitions. It's dividing our country as we speak. Either yes or you're no, or you're undecided, and whilst Rome burns, we can't have this continue. And it was really put to me, for those that get the Daily Mash, if there's any Daily Mash fans in, Farage came to Edinburgh, and they've seen the scenes and they're all shouting and booing at Farage in Edinburgh. But the Daily Mash summed it up for me when he said, Nigel Farage came to Scotland to tell us why the country we're born in is the most important thing about you. And he was chased into a pub by a group of people who believe exactly the same thing. And that is it. That is essentially what nationalism is and does to us. when in fact you're at the point in your life when you should be widening your horizons, raising your game, and looking at the world around you. You're here at university, you've got friends from all over the UK, all over the world. This is the time when you should be reaching out, not looking in. And it doesn't matter to me, if you want to see the bedroom tax abolished, which I do, and frankly, it's just not good enough to abolish the bedroom tax in Scotland. If that's the limit of your ambitions, you shouldn't even be in politics. I don't want to see a bedroom tax anywhere in this country, and that's one of the reasons why I'm fighting for Scotland to stay in the UK. I should say that as Stirling Council, we have mitigated with almost 99% of our tenants that are affected by that, to make sure they're getting discretionary housing payments, because when we see a problem, we should deal with it. That's blaming other people, someone else has done it. Face the problem, deal with it, tackle it, get on with it. We don't have time to wait for independence or whatever it is that's coming round the corner. We need a living wage in this country. I come into administration on Stirling Council after 4 wasted years of a minority SNP council. And one of the first things we did was introduce a living wage, which they never did in 4 years. They had 4 years to do it in the council, they had 8 years to do it in the Scottish Parliament. Stop waiting, get on with it. We can't afford to wait. If it needs done, do it now. Don't wait, don't blame others, don't make excuses, don't say it's someone else. Get on with it. And we're told in the big white paper, the big white elephant, that the biggest thing that independence is going to bring is childcare. We've already got power over childcare. Stirling Council is going to be the first council in Scotland to deliver 600 hours. Now, this year, now. We're not waiting for independence. We've already left the station. Time to get on board. Total nonsense to be here from the Nationalists in that respect. So from my side, I'm keen that we promote the positive case. We want Scotland to stay in the UK. We've launched our Together We Can campaign in Labour. And my final message is lift your heads, lift your horizons, and let's send these separatists home to think again in September.
I can tell you're actually to ask questions now. I can see the frustration on a lot of faces. Remember as well, we're using our Stir debate as well, so I see a lot of people typing away angrily. So, who wants to ask the first question then? Right, well, it's the first hand I saw, so we have one roving mic, so you're going to have to be patient with us. And I was very generous to the panel. I gave you all more than 5 minutes, so I want your responses to be as brief as possible. We are finishing at 9 o'clock. So, yes, chap in the maroon. Should have practiced colours before being
Hi there. Alan, I'd like to express my congratulations to that passion you put on the Union, but that speech should have stayed in the 1700s because, frankly, times change and Scotland's changed. All of you having grander titles, but I think you forgot to mention the unelected House of Lords. This debate for me isn't about economics, it's not about patriotism, it's about democracy in its purest form. Scottish political interests are not represented in Westminster. We vote for governments we have not voted for. Andy, you talk about SNP walking through the Westminster gates with the Conservatives. I'm sure Jackie Baillie was at a Conservative lunch party the other week, so I think the main point is, why should Scotland stand for a union that has put Westminster interests first and Scotland's interests second? It's time for change and the time is now.
We're moving to the BetterTogether side of the panel, so I'll let them reply to that one.
Well, first I would like to point out that Westminster's a very small council in England. I think it's probably Westminster, even at the most grand, probably put more interest than just Westminster. But no, so the idea of the democratic deficit is a bit of a bugbear of mine, because I think it starts with the idea of false consciousness. So the idea is that we do not get the government we vote for. So by that logic, we can see that as England voted overwhelmingly for the Conservatives, and they got a coalition government, largely thanks to Scotland, it would mean that England does not get the government it votes for. So if England don't get the government it votes for, and Scotland don't get the government it votes for, who votes for it? The Welsh, maybe? I don't know. But on the other side of that, we would have to say that at the last Holyrood election, 22% of the eligible vote was cast for the SNP. And yet here we have an SNP majority government. By this logic, we could say that in Scotland we don't get the government that we vote for. We could also say, as a final point, maybe, no, the second point is that Shetland, Orkney and the Borders regularly return in Parliament at Westminster and in Holyrood different MSPs or MPs from the rest of the country. This does not mean, in my view, that Shetland and Orkney and the Borders should break away from Scotland or the United Kingdom. And finally, for this kind of thing, why I think it's false consciousness. The British always get the government they vote for. It starts with the idea that Scotland is a different nation. So in Britain, and then we follow everything from that. Westminster looks out for the interest of the British people, or at least what they think is in the interest of the British people. This idea that they just ignore Scotland because we happen to be Scots, well, it's silly, it doesn't buy up. It's born on the idea that one member, one vote, the system we have in Britain, which means I have as much influence as someone in London, is undemocratic. This is untrue. I'll finish there and let someone else in my panel answer.
Can we do one and one again, I think?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify to Douglas there that what I understand that it is a democracy that we live in today. I'm saying that the government in Westminster very rarely actually resonates the political culture, the dominant political culture of Scotland, in that only 50% of our governments we have elected as a country, not the UK. As a Shetlander, I know that Shetland should not have any more powers than it does already. The reason that Shetland and Orkney should not have any more powers is because they are not countries. It is as simple as that.
I think for me it is certainly that false division. One of my favourite pieces of art is a piece by Leila Curtis called United Kingdom, which I urge you to look up. If you actually look at that map, it's a map of the United Kingdom as you'd think it was, only Gloucester's where Glasgow is, Southampton's where Cardiff is, and that really illustrates it all to me. These are false divisions, false lines in a map, but frankly, you know, we just need to be comfortable in who we are and what we are. And I'm proud to be Scottish, I'm proud to be British, I'm proud to be part of the UK and the EU and a citizen. I'm proud of all that, that's fine. And I think the majority of Scots are actually comfortable in their identity, but ultimately is a constitutional question. I mean, if you want to look back over the last 50 years, well, in 1959, Scotland was the only part of the UK to vote majority Tory. Majority Tory. So the idea that there's some kind of frozen in time socialist utopia is frankly nonsense. This is the only part of these islands that's voted majority Tory, so it really is bunker.
The idea that Scots don't get the government they vote for will only wash if you don't believe Scotland's a country. We do. And we believe that countries should always get the governments that we vote for. Now, reference was made to the coalition earlier. Only 3 times since the 1920s has the Scottish vote made any difference whatsoever to the result of a UK election. So the English overwhelmingly get the government that they vote for. So what we're being told is that it's the destiny of the Scots to remain in the Union so that once, maybe every 30 or 40 years, we can turn a Conservative majority into a Conservative minority.
I think given the amount of hands we've got, we should get another question.
You know, I don't want to concentrate in history, and I think Alan's kind of covered, recent modern political history well. But the reality is, for me, on what level is it right that Scotland, with one Tory MP, and we've got more pandas than Tory MPs, why should that give David Cameron the mandate to make decisions on our behalf, for example, welfare reform, which by 2020 will push 100,000 Scottish children into poverty? And that Scotland, despite our rich resources, we have, according to children's charities, we have 1 in 7 Wains that don't have a winter coat. Yet we have a government of a different ideology, making important decisions that impact on our children, on our families, and on pensioners. So we've got to rectify that. 9% of Scottish MPs out of 650. So for me, and the challenge, and I'm trying to say this in a non-partisan way, is why is it that people who I believe are genuine socialists, genuinely care about social justice as much as I do, why is it that they would rather have David Cameron making these decisions? Why is it that they're content to have Tory rule as opposed to real Home Rule? And that's the challenge that we all must overcome. Now, my sister lives in England. I have many English relatives. And I know that we're all in some ways influenced by what our neighbours do and say and believe. And I'm, my concern for things like, child poverty don't just stop in Scotland, they don't just stop in England. There's, a poverty storm, across Europe and indeed, across the third world. And I very much believe in independence because it's not just about what we can do at home, but it's also about what we can do with our resources abroad as well.
Just to come back to the democratic deficit concept. Essentially, what we've the key words that we've just heard here. Phrase home rule, very, very important phrase. Now, from what I can understand, what I glean from what's being offered in modern politics, that's a form of devolution. So let's get our terms correct first of all. So what you're being offered here is the separation argument. Move away. Doesn't matter what the advantages of the UK are. Move away from them. It's that's how we get there. What you're getting from this side is let's stay in the UK. Let's work. We heard that there was no talk of further devolution. That's just not true. The Liberal Democrats have always had it, and the other two parties are coming out with something. We are going to have further devolution. The genie is out of the bottle on that one. And I think anyone that tells you otherwise is I hate to use that word scaremonger, but that's kind of what they're doing.
Right, we'll answer questions. Once I pick. Just to remind the panel, please try and keep the answers as brief as possible. I know that there's a lot of people who want to answer questions, and we've only got an hour to go. Also, from your point of view, if you want your question answered by the whole panel, can you let us know? Or if it's directed specifically to one person, that'll help us cut down some time as well. The guy in the blue check shirt's been waiting for ages.
Hi there, how do you do? So I'm standing up here. Mine's actually a question, like I can get an answer, not just rhetoric, I'm afraid. It's to do with the University Officer Training Corps. I don't know how well this... Does anyone know what this is? You do? Oh, that's alright then. It's to do with the armed forces and all. The University Officer Training Corps is an organisation that is through universities all across the United Kingdom. And it's to do with getting young officers through to the military. I'm just wondering, will it continue in its current form if there is an independent Scotland? Because in the white paper I didn't really see anything about it. Or will it continue as it is just now? Well, I can see how it continues without it.
Why would it even be affected?
Okay? And
It wouldn't even be affected. He just wants to highlight the fucking corpse, that's all he wants.
Thank you.
Why would it even be affected? Sorry.
Is that directed to a specific person, or do you...
Well, who can answer it? That's what I'd ask. Because I don't know who can answer it.
I'll be honest with you, I have absolutely no idea.
It is, it's a quite specific question, I should say. Yes.
Sorry, are you speaking about the university's role in this?
No, with regards to will there be
You're speaking about defence in general?
It's really quite specific, it is. It really is. That's why. It's will the Scottish Government continue to fund, the sort of placements for, officers to go to join the British Army, as it does with other, as the Commonwealth does already, as we can get, the Republic of Ireland, they can just send officers to serve in the British forces, or will it stop that completely?
it's after the referendum.
Right, well, let the panel come back on that one.
I'm going to do my best to answer your question as precisely as I can. Now, I'm not au fait with every arrangement on the campus of Stirling University, but what I can say is that defence is important for two reasons. One, for the defence of the realm, and defence is important for things like jobs and investment as well. So yes, an independent Scotland, like an independent Norway, like an independent Sweden, will of course have armed forces, and we will, require young people to train as officers to be part of the armed forces. There is an entire chapter in the white paper on defence. We can of course get more specific information to you. But it's important to remember that Scotland just now contributes £3 billion a year to defence costs. That's our share of the UK defence costs. But in terms of defence spending and things like procurement, which is what relates to the jobs, we get £2 billion back every year. So what we proposed in the white paper is to spend £2.5 billion, which will be more than is currently spent in Scotland, but obviously it gives us a saving to spend on other matters as well. And in the white paper it gives numbers about how many forces that we think we need, where they'll be based, and defence spending will be on a par with other small independent nations.
Can I just say something here? That it's going back to what I was saying about it not being the be-all and end-all. It's fine. That yes vote's really just the start. The yes vote is great, excellent, brilliant start. But what you would like to see with specific interests and a very specific issue, such as yourself had. It really depends on the party that you vote in after that yes vote. So it's going to be dependent on this. An SNP voice only actually represents one of the many visions in which we'll see post-independence. So your question, the answer to your question will vary massively depending on what party you vote in.
So my apologies, everyone. I got that one there.
Yeah, just a quick point about statistics. Wonderful things. That's the second statistic we've heard from this side. The first one was 9.3% tax revenue versus 91% spending. And there's a similar statistic just now. I'm willing to admit that those statistics are true. What I'm not willing to let slide is the assumption on which they are based. They are based on the assumption that governments run balanced budgets. That spending equals, income equals spending. That's just not true. The size of the pot that we as part of the UK family create together that allows us to spend the amount of money that we do is remarkable. It's a wonderful achievement of our economic and political union. So if we can just ask for just to bear that in mind, whenever you hear statistics, think, where are the samples coming from?
Does anybody else want to come in on that, or can we move to another?
No, please, something new.
Right, maybe
Okay, I'm desperate to ask a question because this is the first opportunity I have ever seen the BetterTogether campaign to put the case for their side. But however, in terms of trying to stop frustration here, what I would suggest is that everybody else gets a chance to ask the question and each side allocate one person to answer it, so that all these folk get a chance to make
Yeah, sure, let's do that. Right, hold on a minute, so yeah.
Talk about and how they're they can't be disproved, and you've gone on about how this union is so great and how the economics and the wonderment that we have with this union. What about the fact that 170% rise in food banks in this country in the past 12 months? What about austerity causing people to be out of their homes, that are having to hand back food to food banks because they can't afford to turn on their gas to cook that food? Statistics don't lie, and that's a statistic that, as a Scot, worries me. So really, I think that the rhetoric has gone a bit too far.
I guess we're back to this point again about false divisions and where we are. Just like if we want the bedroom tax abolished, frankly, that you just want to abolish in Scotland is not good enough, and not good enough by miles. If you want the bedroom tax abolished, it should be abolished everywhere here in the UK. If you want food banks abolished, frankly, I do not want food banks abolished just in Scotland because we think that's what should be done here. No, not good enough. Not good enough by miles.
If we could let our speakers speak, please.
Food banks should be abolished everywhere, and that's the fundamental flaw at the heart of where nationalism is coming from. It's time to lift your horizons. If it's good enough for Scotland, it's good enough for everywhere.
Yes, I do want food banks abolished in Scotland, and I make no apologies about that. I also want food banks to be unnecessary everywhere else, but Scots do not have the power to change that. Unfortunately, the governments that have been elected in the UK, as we've said earlier, have not been the governments that Scotland wanted. Now, Scotland voted overwhelmingly against Thatcherism in the 1980s. Thatcherism was hostile to Scotland, it was hostile with the whole of the UK working class, and we saw what was coming. Because the storm that we're in at the moment, the reason food banks exist is a direct result of an economic policy that Scots rejected 30 years ago. We do not have the ability to use our vote to change the current UK policy. So that's why I said earlier that if we want to try and tackle poverty, the best way we can do that is to show an example of an economy that works for the people, and then allow the English to copy it.
So we're going to go for 2 questions at the back, and you just keep the mic up there, we'll go for 2 questions at the back then.
Okay, my question's to the Yes panel. Everything you want to do requires money. And as someone who works for a small growing business in Scotland, what we are really worried about in the future is the certainty of where that money is going to come from, what currency we're going to be using, especially when we do a lot of dealings outside of the United Kingdom. And the second part of my question would be is, being myself, I've been on university committees and things like that in the past, and the massive concern across the universities, as well as companies in this country, is that from September 18th, we don't know where we're going. There's no certainty as to where funding is going to come from for educational institutions, and companies are worried about what currency we're going to use. Why can't we have answers to these questions, which we require to make a decision about whether we want Scotland to go independent or not? We're not getting the answers, and nobody, not one of the parties, not one of the organisations in the Yes campaign, has told us what currency we have. You haven't got a plan B. If you don't get the pound, that's not patronising at all. Thank you.
Angela?
Gentleman asked a number of, sorry, I'm just standing on the cable. Gentleman asked a number of very important questions and very serious questions in relation to currency and also in relation to how you grow business. Can I start by saying that the Scottish Parliament, we have some economic powers. We have about 6 economic powers compared to the 20 plus that rest with Westminster. Nonetheless, with that partial independence that we already have, I think we've used that well to support business. We have things like the small business bonus, which is, recognising that the majority of business in this country isn't, big businesses, actually sole traders or very small businesses, and they are often the backbone of our high streets and our local communities, and that's because we have a focus on job creation as much as we can within the powers that we have. And it's also, you say everything, revolves around money, and I think, to pick up a point that was made earlier, actually the Scottish budget, Scottish Parliament has to produce a balanced budget, because unlike some parish councils in England, unlike Stormont in Northern Ireland, just now, and it will change, we don't have any borrowing powers, so we have to produce a balanced budget, and that, of course, mitigates some very tough choices that we have to make. Now, in terms of the currency union, can I say, the matter of currency is an important one. It's one that the Scottish Government gave great detailed thought to, or at least 18 months ago or longer, when we produced the Fiscal Commission working groups report on macroeconomic policy for an independent Scotland. If anybody's really looking for a nighttime read to help with insomnia, I recommend it. But the serious point is, the Scottish Government, long before Ed Balls, etc., George Osborne, got in cahoots to try and tell us what we can and can't do, and that we can't use our own pound, the Scottish Government, was working away with this. We set up an independent commission, 2 Nobel laureates, world-leading economists, and they produced a report which has 4 options, and in effect ranked those options A, B, C, and D, with the best option being a currency union. And the Scottish Government isn't going to be bullied against what we see as the best option for Scotland. And the interesting thing about a currency union is it's not just in Scotland's best interest, it's actually in the interest of the UK. And because English businessmen and business people and women won't want to be paid transaction charges. And this sterling, this is as much our pound as it is anybody else's. The Bank of England's a national asset. It was nationalised in 1948. I mean, even Gordon Brown made the Bank of England in its decision-making as independent. So it's as much our central bank as anybody else's. And we shouldn't be bullied or listen to their bluff and buster away from what we see as the best option for Scotland. Now I recognise that other people will have different views about what currency we should use in an independent Scotland, and I respect those views. But all I'm going to say is the Scottish Government, we've looked at this in great detail, and we've already had the big currency confession from that unnamed UK government minister. And it's interesting, that they'll say one thing in private, but then another thing in public.
I'm going to try and keep this brief because Angela went over quite a lot. I could spend all night on currency. First I would like to correct one thing. It's not often said by people on the Yes Count that the currency is an asset. This isn't true. It's neither an asset or a liability. It's, well, currency. They're not the same thing. Also, the Bank of England is not an asset. It's an institution of the United Kingdom. As such, it would belong to the successor state. But on to the currency union. So far, we have had the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the First Secretary of the Treasury, the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Permanent Secretary for the Treasury, the Leader of the Opposition, the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee, the First Minister of Wales, pretty much every backbencher who's spoken on the issue, and the majority of the people of the rest of Great Britain have said, well, actually, we don't quite like the idea of a currency union. And as late ago as April 2013, an all-party House of Lords committee said that the SNP's currency union was devoid of precedent and had fanciful. Now, why have they said this? Well, it's because the United Kingdom has always been reluctant to join currency unions without political unions. This is just a political reality of the United Kingdom. I would also like to say that the 3 chancellors didn't say Scotland couldn't use the pound, but they said they didn't want to enter into a currency union. They said that the 2 things are not the same. And if the rest of the United Kingdom do not want to join a currency union without a political union, it is not in the remit of the SNP to dictate that to the rest of the United Kingdom. If the rest of the United Kingdom do not want to join a currency union, it's insulting to say, no, we've decided, we've had an independence referendum, so we've decided we're just going to force it on you. That's not how international diplomacy works, and it's not how a fair society should work.
Hi, I'd just like to start by addressing 2 points made by the BetterTogether panel. The first was that Scotland, as you argued, that Scotland hasn't got the government voted for. Given that figures released by the independent newspaper earlier on this year showed that the poverty gap is now as large in 2014 as it was in the Victorian era, I would first argue that no one has got the government they voted for anywhere in the UK. The second thing I'd like to just also point out is there's a lot of talk about British pride and being a family. At some point, every person in this room
as proud as they maybe be of their family, made a decision to step away from the family. Now, in my own personal experience, I ended up with a degree, so I would say going independent by myself worked out quite well there. The question is this though, a lot of the debate seems to be focused on whether or not how Scotland would do as an independent nation. I would like to hear a member from each side talk about why Scotland shouldn't stay in the UK with a focus on the UK's financial future.
If someone wants to go first, I think.
As far as having a bleak financial future, that's just not credible or true. As far as the G7 and G8 countries, the UK recovered faster and is recovering faster than any of those other developed nations. We're doing better than. That's you're talking. That's just not true. And obviously we all want to get rid of poverty. No one, and certainly minimise it as best as we possibly can. No one on this side is pro-poverty. I want to make that clear. None of us are. We're not pro-poverty at all. What we think is that you can do better with the financial security and the togetherness of all the United Kingdom in terms of spending that extra, multiplied, generated wealth better and saving their revenue.
Yes, it's a really good question. As it stands just now, we are the fourth most, this is not statistics I made up, might I add, the fourth most unequal nation in the developed world. 1 in 5 of our Albanians live in poverty. By 2030, the child poverty rate in Glasgow alone is predicted to reach 50%. We are a wealthy nation. We do not, that's a disgrace. That's not a mishap. That's a direct consequence of decades of social policy having adverse consequences on us and our livelihoods. Now, BetterTogether regularly say, we have the powers to change this. It is said time and time again, the SNP's white paper was released, that we have the powers to actually fix this as it stands just now. For example, childcare. That's a devolved power just now. We could change it if we want to. But we don't have the power to do that realistically, because the effects of austerity are felt here, and the budget is still allocated to us from Osborne's pocket. Or not, in this case maybe. We are a wealthy nation, and we're by and large a social democratic nation. Having a 50% child poverty rate, 1 in 5 just now, and being the fourth most unequal nation in the developed world is not justifiable. We're not better together. We can do significantly better than this.
We are experiencing a little bit of sound problem with that radio mic when it's far away, so if possible, could we get you to do the 2 questions together and then we can bring the mic back closer to stop that sound problem.
My question is specifically to Labour councillor.
I don't think it's going to work from that distance. Could you maybe try and shout it?
Yeah, to Labour councillor, you keep on banging on about the bedroom tax, but when Labour had the chance to abolish it from the whole of the UK, which was the whole argument, not enough of your MPs turned up to abolish it, so what's your argument for that?
I'm a politics student here, aren't you? So in that case, I can only highly suggest that you go and look at what the actual vote was in relation to, because that vote would not have the effect that you have suggested. What will have the effect that you suggested is voting Labour in 2015 and to abolish the bedroom tax, not here in Scotland.
If you could let Mr Gibson finish his response, please.
I cannot be more crystal clear. Go and look at the actual vote that took place, what it was actually about, what it would actually have done, and you will find that that vote in itself would not have abolished the bedroom tax. So this is the bogeyman that gets puts about by the SNP. But whilst we're on the bedroom tax, let me say a word for our Labour MSPs, who this year, for the first time in any SNP administration, supported the SNP budget this year. And they supported that budget this year because pressure was unrelenting on the SNP Scottish Government to use the power that it has, to use the money that it has to mitigate against the bedroom tax. Because they had the money, but in their words, they found the money this year, which leaves the obvious question, why didn't they find the money last year? But I put on record my thanks and my praise that the SNP have found the money this year, the money that they didn't find last year. But they've done the right thing this year. I will give them credit for that. And that's why I'm pleased that the Labour MSPs supported that budget, because they could have done it if they wanted to. So let's have no bogeymen.
I think the Scottish Government has a proud record of mitigating bad decisions taken by a bad, out-of-touch government south of the border. We spend £257 million on trying to make amends for bad welfare decisions. Now, we're always glad to do that because your instinct as a politician, I think that extends across the chamber, and it was good for once to see Labour actually support a Scottish Government budget, as opposed to being quite churlish and childish and going away in the huff. This is me, I promise to try and be non-partisan, but it's difficult. But well, I'll tell you, I will try hard, because the fact is, for every pound that the Scottish Government spends on mitigating welfare cuts or bad welfare decisions, it's a pound less I can spend on getting young people back to work. And that's the reality that we face. That's a very tough choice to have to make. Well, I'm sick of mitigating bad decisions from a bad government elsewhere that we didn't even vote for in the first place. I want a Scottish Government, and I don't care who that Scottish Government is at the end of the day, as long as they represent the democratic will of the people of this country.
We're going to go to the chat. I promised up there in the red top, yeah.
Yes, going back to the whole idea of currency union, does Scotland really have a choice of what currency it uses? Given that it has to be applied to join the EU, it's a legal requirement that they have to adopt.
No, it's not. Only after 2 years. Yeah, it's totally.
You're joining European monetary.
It's only after 2 years, yeah. But hopefully she'll settle right.
Okay, the EU, that's a subject that occupies all our minds, and it certainly has been one of the regular features of any referendum debate. But you know what? Since 1973, I was only 3 years old at the time, Scotland has been a member of the European Community since 1973. Now, some people might have views about that, they might think that's a good thing or that's a bad thing. But the reality is, we're all European citizens. And the suggestion that just because Scotland peacefully and democratically exercises her right to vote for independence, there is some notion that Scotland's going to be cast adrift the North Atlantic. Because the thing about the EU, the European Community, is it's helped to keep peace in Europe. It's a flexible organisation. It's an expansionist organisation. And in the words of Barroso's often quoted, but Barroso describes the European Community as about solidarity, justice, the rule of law and democracy. And that's the Scotland that we're about. And that's the Europe that we're about. And there is no European treaty with a clause that says, that's you, we can point to that clause and you're expelled. What we will have to do is we will have to negotiate from within. White Paper has indicated that Article 48 of the Treaty of Rome, I think, is not a legal option for us, and so is the Lisbon Treaty, beg your pardon. It's getting late, past my bedtime. So there is a legal route for us to negotiate from within. And no European country has said that they will veto Scotland. And what you have to remember about Scotland is we're net contributors to Europe. We play an active part in Europe. We meet all the recommendations. We abide by all the European rules. We've got a quarter of Europe's renewable energy. We've got fish. We've got loads of water. We've got a positive contribution to make to Europe, and not least the number of European students that come and benefit from studying in Scottish universities. And we can, and just my final point, because I apologise, this is perhaps in a bit of a social policy lecture and it wasn't meant to be, but my final point is that we can't be made to join the Euro, because to join the Euro, and this is a matter of fact, you've got to be a member of the European exchange rate mechanism for 2 years, and Scotland, lo and behold, is not a member of the European exchange rate mechanism, and you can't be made to join the European exchange rate mechanism. So I'm confident that Scotland will be a member, continue our membership of the European Union, and that will be using sterling.
So what the EU the guy at the top is actually correct, lo and behold. Now, we've said there is nothing in an EU treaty that says that a successor state, or if a state broke away from one of the member states, it would be cast out. This is true. There is also nothing in any EU treaty which says it would automatically have membership. This is also a fact. Like, unless the Scottish Government has an appendix of the Maastricht Treaty or Lisbon Treaty that was given to no one else, this is just a fact. What this means is that it would have to go up to a vote. At the very least, it would have to go up to a vote among all European nations, all 28 of them. All it would take is one veto from either one of these nations or the President of the European Commission, and that's it. Now, Spain, the Spanish Prime Minister, has already said that if this was the case, he would veto it. Also, we have to say that there is pretty much every EU nation has some kind of nationalist state within it. But, and so we probably veto it anyway. Now, the final point I would have to make, and this is something I've always found a bit odd about the yes position, even when I was a yes member, is that the EU's explicit aim, its number one aim, is ever closer political union. So you have to ask, why are yes so desperate to leave the political union we're already in, and so desperate to get into a political union with Europe? Is the problem with the current European settlement, the idea, or the current British settlement, there's no Germans and French? Now, I've heard people shout, we're already in it. This is true, I'm pro-Europe, but we have to ask, why are yes pro-Europe? What's the difference between being a member of the UK and a member of the EU? The only difference that I can find...
One of the countries...
said, the EU is linked to ever closer political union. And so we are going to, and whereas the UK, so not the EU, the UK doesn't want to leave, UKIP want to leave.
Can we let Douglas speak, and can we reserve shouting out for when you're actually asked to answer a question, please?
So, to summarise, I would like to say that there is nothing in any EU treaty that would give us automatic membership of the EU. Nothing at all, so it would have to go to a vote. It would probably be vetoed. And that the EU is to ever closer political union. I think it's completely hypocritical to say, no, I don't want to be part of the ever more federalist Britain, but I want to be part of the ever more centralised European Union. The two don't add up.
Right, we have a question here, and we'll move this up in the way.
Hi there. I'd just like to point a question towards BetterTogether. You're looking all over the place. And it's, UK OK is their slogan. I'm kind of sick of the idea of it being OK. Why can't Scotland be incredible on its own? UK OK. I feel so belittled by everything that the BetterTogether side is saying tonight. It is condescending
Yeah.
towards Scotland.
What's your question?
Okay. My question is that you talk about uncertainty and the uncertainty that a yes vote would bring. In a no vote situation, there is still uncertainty. You talk about more devolution, but on the cards just now there's devote max, devote more, devote plus, devote supersize. After a no vote, there would be the uncertainty of like any political party. Who comes to power and who actually goes forward with devolution is completely up to the party who's in power. So what kind of certainty can you give that Scotland would actually receive more devolution?
So I think in a nutshell the question is where is devolution going if we vote no?
Well, I would first of all encourage you to come along tomorrow night to our event with Liz Smith and Anna Maguire. Also, you've got every single unionist party, every party of the Better Together campaign are pro further devolution. Considering it's going to come out. And I would suggest to you that the version of further devolution, the version of devolution we will get after we vote to stay together, is the one that the people of Scotland will vote for. It'll be that party, the people that we vote for, who go into the Scottish Parliament, that will be their mandate to go forward with. I can't make it any clearer than that. It's Scottish democracy working within Scotland.
Alan Bissette?
More devolution is an illusion. It's not going to happen. What is being proposed at the moment is more responsibilities. So what the plan is to readjust the Barnett formula that Scotland's grant is decreased, but more tax raising powers will have been given. Therefore, in order to cover that decrease in the budget, the government, after a no vote in Scotland, will have to raise taxes, making them quite unpopular, allowing Labour to come in and occupy the ruins at the other side of that. Devolution wasn't on the ballot paper for a reason. The unionist parties fought to remove it from the ballot paper for a reason, because they don't want to give us any more powers. It'll be framed as more powers. It'll feel like more powers when they say it, but in reality they won't give us any more power than suits them. And the thing is, we won't have any ability or any power to stop that, because our one bargaining chip at the moment with Westminster is the threat of independence. Once we lose that bargaining chip, we are powerless. We're essentially hostage to the future good graces and benevolence of any UK government. And if they decide to do what they like to Scotland, what are we going to do about that? We can't do anything about it. They'll say, this is what you voted for. You voted to be reabsorbed back into the UK, so therefore we can change this situation to our benefit any time we like. So the devolution that's being offered won't actually give us any more power or any more money. And in fact, Joanne Lamont was interviewed in the Northern Echo today about that very issue, and she actually said Scotland will be getting no more money, it will be getting more tax-raising powers. No more money. So devolution will not happen.
The question I've been dying to ask all night, and it's all these pro-union parties. So the pro-union parties, right? You want to keep nuclear weapons, yeah? You're the worst thing up for that. So every major party that's in the union wants to keep nuclear weapons, right? You're banging on about, sorry, I didn't mean banging on. You thought about spending money on poverty, right? You want to address poverty, you want to get rid of food banks. I've never heard you talk about social housing or building Stirling. Getting rid of nuclear weapons, right? No paying 100 billion for something that you're never going to use, right? It's a lot mainly a priority than what your nuclear weapons are, right? I mean, you no need for these things. Yeah. You came out with a statement earlier on, right? I just want you to justify it because you came out with unity, strength and camaraderie have made Britain great. What's great about nuclear weapons? Can you tell me that?
So the question is what's great about nuclear weapons?
So that's that, you're perfectly entitled to that opinion if that's what you want to believe, but we're pebbled as myth by the Yes campaign, we, as in we, Scotland, we, others, we, and then them and us, and the other.
You're drawing lines.
I listen to you.
Can we let him? Thank you. on your own.
So the fundamental flaw that's at the heart of the argument is exactly what I said at the start. Is they'll tell you it's about this, they'll tell you it's about that, they'll tell you it's about the next thing. It's about none of these things, because if this is the perspective that's to be believed, that's being advanced by the Yes Scotland of whatever colour and hue, what is it about removing nuclear weapons from the Clyde to the Tyne that would make you feel so much safer? What a bogus prospectus to go ahead with that. What is it about having it anywhere else in the UK that makes you feel so superior? What is it about having it anywhere else? If you want rid of it, that's a legitimate position, then get rid of it. If that's your perspective. But to try and relate it to a constitutional... So you're at it again.
Right, you have asked the question, he's trying to respond to the question.
So, if that's your perspective, which you're absolutely entitled to, then it's no better than here than anywhere else on this island. And that's the reality of it. It's a constitutional debate. It's not about this and that, and it's actually wanting to get all worked up about, and that's great. But look at the reality. It's about which politicians take which decisions and which will. This is a constitutional debate. We can debate the politics and the politics any old time. Let's stop conflating the two and get real here.
Anybody on the yes panel?
Yeah. Well, it's very interesting that you should mention us portraying this as them and us, and then give an example of Yes Scotland actually implying that we would really like England to actually have all of the nuclear weapons because they kind of deserve them after all. That's absolutely no. I was being sarcastic. John Ainsley wrote a really good report. He's head of Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Wrote an amazing report called "Try Didn't Know Where to Go" a little while ago, and it's groundbreaking. It's absolutely fantastic. He's done incredible work with the campaign as well, and it explores different options, and it's looking at different ways in which these absolute nuclear relics can be removed off of our shores. But where they would actually go next. And this is not about the Yes campaign thinking that we would like to give them to England and that they should stay there. And it's just unimaginable that people would suggest that, to be perfectly honest. £100 billion is almost the entire UK's deficit. That is how much they are currently investing in an outmoded, redundant piece of machinery. Even in terms of military might, is a redundant piece of machinery. I think that this is an incredible chance, a really incredible chance, to actually portray ourselves in a positive light in the international community. Imagine we had allies that advocate peace in the international community. Imagine those were our allies, not the allies we have just now.
Right, we have about 15 minutes to go. I'm going to try and get everybody to get their hand up for a question. Can we go along this line? Can we do the 3 hands that are up there, please?
Hi there. I'm a 4th year cell biology student at the university, just to give you context. Angela, you mentioned that we are a leader in life sciences, pharmaceuticals and so on, and that is indeed correct. And Danny did actually say that we have to make the most of your education and just get on with it, make the best of what you've got, which is great, totally behind that. But why does the current science minister, which is Alistair Allen, have a PhD in Gaelic language and Lowland Scots for SNP, and the Conservative minister have a PBE degree and nothing else? How can he dictate science to me or anything else?
Why? No.
Alan? What is the problem?
I'm not quite sure this is a constitutional issue, but I will nonetheless try and give you the courtesy of an answer. I think we want more young people and more young women in particular to be studying science, and I say that as a former social worker, and I don't think we should have, I don't think any learning's wasted. Dr. Allen has a very worthy PhD, he's a very learned individual. But can I say to you, as an employment minister, that when I look at the economy, I see that STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, subjects for those careers are very much the future, and I'm certainly doing my utmost in my current post and will continue that in my new post to encourage more young men and particularly young women to pursue careers in science.
The point you made about ministers not being qualified in respective fields is a great one, and it speaks to a problem that exists wherever politics happens. It's something that happens absolutely everywhere. There aren't enough engineers, scientists, whatever, getting involved in the political process. Your second point, however, I'd like to address the thing with universities. The reason that Scotland can, one of the reasons that Scotland can attract world-class academics, world-class students to our universities, of which we are rightly proud, is we have consistent, dependable funding from the UK Research Council. We can afford to attract these people to put in the salaries of work and to do the research, and it works in that cycle.
So, chat there, you've been waiting a long time.
Actually, since the debate started. Arms are really sore. Actually, I'm going to try and keep this brief because it has come out from actually your opening statements, and it is a question for both sides. But just to address something really quickly, to claim that the union between Britain and the European Union are the same is utterly farcical in its absolute form, and it is actually, it's more than ridiculous to claim that they're the absolute same. Sorry, I've written down the phone really quickly. I mean, how can you claim that? You just did. Like the European Union is the exact same, and just to, sorry to kind of move further, but to claim that the European Union is the same as the butcher's apron or the Union Jack known across the world for its oppression, ridiculous. Right. Secondly, social democratic is totally different. It's a democratic movement in Scotland compared to nationalism. And to get to my question, no problem. Right. It's actually to do with education. Yeah, you can occur.
Just kind of
sorry, right. To do with education, you hit the nail on the head when you said that we've got politicians in just now who are totally out of touch with the issues they're representing. But you're doing a PPE course, the exact same as everyone in Westminster.
I want to be a journalist.
Yeah, I'm not saying.
Can we get to the question, please?
But the point is that with education, as an employment minister, with education in Scotland, how can we avoid another political elite class from taking over like it has in Westminster?
I actually don't consider myself as part of the political elite, because one of the things that I'm really, really proud of is courtesy and thanks to this university. I had a long career as a social worker, and you might have views about that if you're studying science, but I worked for many years within our prison system. My last job before I was elected to Parliament in 2007 was at the State Hospital at Carstairs. I believe, and I'm quite proud of this, I have loads of valuable life experience because of my upbringing in a West Lothian mining village, but also because of my professional career before life in politics. And I won't be an expert in science, and I don't dictate to scientists, but I hope as an employment minister that I can ensure that our young people and their parents are well informed as about where the jobs are today and where the jobs will be in the future. And what I want in the Scotland I seek a Scotland that has young people and their economic interests and that gives them the best start to their working lives. And one of the really exciting opportunities about an independent Scotland is that prospect of a written constitution where the rights of the people are guaranteed, I suppose, against the prevailing government. So we can write into that constitution that our young people have an absolute right to an education based on the ability to learn and not the ability to pay, something I feel particularly strong about because I've benefited greatly from higher education, not once but twice, the University of Glasgow and the University of Stirling. But I know that this lassie from a West Lothian mining village would not have pursued higher education if I was faced with £9,000 in fees. So I want to see in the Scotland that I seek free education enshrined in a written constitution. And I also, as a lassie from a West Lothian mining village that knows about the impact of unemployment, I want our young people to have the right to training and to have a right to work, and for that to be achieved, we need to be encouraging our young people to be voting for a parliament with the economic powers that can deliver those rights.
First with the EU question, if I came across as saying that, the statement, first if I came across as saying that I thought the EU and the UK were the same, that was not my intention. I merely think that there's a bit of a form of distance between the, so the Yes campaign, as far as I can see, really likes the idea of Scotland having sovereignty. Now, the EU, since its inception, the idea of ever closer to political union is to kind of take sovereignty away from the nation state, if you like, into this multinational treaty organisation. As such, I think there's a bit of a juxtaposition between the idea of, well, we want sovereignty in Scotland unless Brussels want that sovereignty. That was really what I meant. I'm sorry about it. But first, the second point, and touching on your second point, and I think Angela touched on this. As a wee laddie from a West Lothian mining village, I would like to say that the best one, Angela, the only one that matters, that's right. No, but
we all want to get home tonight, can we keep it going?
Yes, we'll stop with our debate back and forth about what's the best town in West Lothian. No, so I think it starts here, but I also know the problems of unemployment. I'm currently unemployed, and Alan at the start asked me, well, why did I jump ship? Why did I go from Yes to BetterTogether? And it's quite simply this. I came to the conclusion that actually what I didn't want was independence, I wanted increased devolution. It's my, you might disagree with me on this point, but it's my position that if you just took independence out of Yes Scotland's debates, what we would be arguing for, and what the panel here I think have been arguing for, is for increased devolution, where within the Scottish Parliament, you might disagree, but this is where it's come from, this is why I'm voting no, is increased devolution would give us the ability, and through the Scotland Act, and the increased devolution is going to come our way after the 2015 general election, we'll have these powers to combat this unemployment, child poverty. Already the Scottish Government has control of 60% of the public money sent to Scotland, which is an awful lot. After devolution is expanded, we'll have control of even more, and we'll have control of even more tax rate to increase the budget we have. I think this is a good thing. I'm supportive of this. I think it can be achieved within the UK, but I also like the idea of being within the UK where we have this economic security, if you like, of economies of scale. This is why I decided to vote no. Now, education's already involved. So that's why I've not kind of talked about education. Education is like culture and all these other things that involve power, and has been since 1999. If there's a problem with education, it lies more or less at the field of Holyrood, not Westminster, so I don't think it was. But that's essentially why I changed sides. These are up to anyone who's on this. I know there's probably more of you people there.
Right, we have another question there, and then we're going to go up to the chat in the light blue top up there.
I've actually found myself a great... Oh, just right.
Let me try and take those in stages. If Scotland became independent, and we did manage to create the sort of country that we're talking about, where the wealth was redistributed, and we did manage to establish an oil fund, we give the north of England aid.
Third world country? I like that.
That is a distinct possibility. And that would establish good relations with our neighbours. That would help redistribute the wealth. And also the point that you made about devolution within England, I think is a very good one, because if we manage to make a go of it, and they see how that worked out for us, then the north of England probably would start to agitate for regional assembly. There was a devolution referendum, I think it was in the late 90s, John Prescott's idea. He wanted devolution for the north, they wanted a northern parliament, and it was voted against, but I think there would be fresh impetus for that in the wake of Scottish independence. But the idea that we can't have solidarity with people in these islands because we're independent doesn't bear scrutiny. I mean, if you look at the 1980s, during the miners' strike, miners in Fife and miners in Yorkshire, they showed solidarity with each other, they supported each other, and they did not need Westminster rule to validate it. It was actually done despite Westminster rule. It was a natural, organic thing between workers across the borders. It didn't require them to be in a political, constitutional union. And also when the poll tax was introduced in Scotland a year first by Thatcher, the anti-poll tax resistance that took place in Scotland, we exported those ideas further south when the poll tax was introduced there, which is why they were then able to take those tactics and those techniques and use it to topple Thatcher. And that did not require a constitutional political arrangement. It was done, again, naturally and organically between the workers. So I think there are all sorts of ways in which we can help improve the British Isles by being independent. Ironically, more than we can while we're in the Union, because our vote, which is the only power that we have at the moment, is relatively redundant.
I would like to say on the issue of solidarity, we can have solidarity with independent countries, so in the same way as we have solidarity currently with France. I would argue it's not quite the same thing as solidarity within the United Kingdom. For instance, Alan brings up the idea of unions in Fife and somewhere in England, I forget, Yorkshire, having solidarity in the 80s. Now, as far as I can remember, in the 1980s, we were with political unions. I don't know exactly what point.